Hi guys, welcome. This is Liesel and we are doing the robin's nest. So make sure that you have your paint supplies. You have black, white, bright red, bright yellow, and phthalo blue. And if you have pre-mixed browns, raw umber or burnt umber, you can use those to help get you to the brown a lot faster and not have to mix all the time. So those are options. And then for brushes, I have a large, flat, couple of medium examples. So medium round, around a number 4 to number 6 or bigger, and detailed brushes, a number 2 and number 0. So you don't have to have both of these, but you can pick one of these. These are just examples. I use this for the background, this for the base coat on the nest, and mostly these for all the little details with the twigs and a bit of the eggs as well. Okay, so I have my water cut paper towel, and this is my 10 by 10 canvas. Let's start with our background. So when we were working with our background, large brush, dip it in the water. Take blue, white, touch of black, maybe one more dot if you want it to be more of a gray color. So you can have your background color be almost anything. I don't want to go too blue. It's going to clash with my actual blue eggs. So you want to definitely put in a little bit more black and white, and then maybe just a hint of blue so you have it very, very grayish and slightly blue looking. And you can also do, I wouldn't do brown either because your nest is going to be brown and it could, again, clash big time with it. I'm going to go back and forth like this. Just test it out, see how it's looking. Touch of water. I'm going to take an extra dip of black here. And you can see it kind of dilutes all of that blue that I had in my brush. And you can always add in a little scoop of white on your brush to lighten up what you've just done. See a little bit of white, and you can go right over top and just brighten it. So you can do it to your liking. And I'm just going to go all the way through. I like it how it's streaky, so just embrace the streakiness. Touch of water, maybe change it up a little bit, maybe add a touch more blue here and there. So if I maybe go a little bit more on the blue side and put in a couple streaks of that, then go to some more of my gray, you can get some nice streakiness. So don't overblend is what I'm saying. Let the brush strokes kind of show. Adding a touch of black this time. So I like to mix my paint as I go. See, a bit more black, changing up just the hues a little bit. Touch of water. See, that's definitely more gray. Maybe a bit more white this time. Take a little dip of white. Yeah. And I like to go end to end just to avoid any choppy marks with brush strokes kind of ending in the middle. I just like to go from end to end using the flat side. Water, paint, maybe a bit more black and white. And if you're a little bit fancy, you can keep it darker on the tops and bottoms if you want to for more of a vignette look, and on the edges, but that's just preference really. Kind of kept it random, so. Okay, so that's the background. You can add more streaks of blue if you want it to be a bit more bluish. And oops, I got here, that's okay. Just get that off. And then we can just let that sit for a minute or two. It doesn't have to be fully dry, but fairly dry. After we do with the same brush if you want. So you can do the same brush, or if you happen to have, I'm just drying it off on my napkin, have something a little bit smaller, and you can use something like this, but I'm just going to use the same one because it still has a flat edge. I'm good with it. And we're going to streak in the little wood board lines. See that? To just divide it to make it look more like it's got some wood pieces. And let's just bring this down a little bit more. So you can see I started my first one roughly around here. So I'm just going to press, go all the way through. Try to keep it as straight as possible. And you can use a ruler, of course. Try not to keep going over it because you will pick up your background color a lot, and it actually turns lighter and lighter and lighter. So if you want to do second coat, come back when it's more dry. Then I'm going to leave a nice gap. I'm just doing 2 lines, so it looks like I have 3 panels, and that's a really nice number to have, personally, I think, in paintings. So I'm going to press again, so roughly around here, and just go all the way through. Doesn't have to be perfect because wood is not perfect. Has lots of character into it, and you kind of want to capture that a bit. So there, I have 2 lines. Then I'm just going to wash this off and let it sit for a minute. I'm going to deepen it up in the center when it's a bit more dry. And just take a step back because I actually pressed a little bit harder than you think. I didn't go too thin. Then it just looks like you can kind of confuse it with knots in the wood. I want it to have that slight gap. So that's what the black is for, to give it more of a gap in between the panels. And there's little things you can do while it's drying, but maybe grab a blow dryer to make it dry faster. If you want, wave it around. We're going to put in streaks of like knots in the wood, have fun with that, and then finish up with the black in the center and a little highlight. Okay, so let's start with the knots in the wood, and I'm going to use my super small detail brush number 0. You're going to use a lot, not a lot of water, but a fair bit of water. And colors can be from dark gray to brown and white and all that kind of stuff, even black. So I'm going to actually mix a bit of a brown, and you can grab any of your brown. Mix some, just a little bit of yellow and red. If you want to get a pile going already, you can. So this is basically how I'm going to always make my brown, roughly. You can change it up here and there a bit, but equal parts red and yellow. So you get this red orangey look. Then take just a little bit of black at a time until you're happy with how dark it is. So I took a fair bit of black, and you can see it's super dark brown. So that's a dark brown. You can add a touch of white to give it a little bit of lighter color. Okay, so that's just an example of making some sort of brown. Now, if you add less black, so if I mix this again, equal parts red and yellow, and then just a little bit less black, it starts turning a bit brown, but it also keeps a lot of that warm orange color. So I'm gonna add a bit more at a time. And look at that, you have this warm reddish brown, and you add more yellow to your liking if you don't like it as red type of thing. So if I add a bit more yellow, it's not as red looking, but see, it's just a bit of a lighter warm brown, and you can add a touch of white again to make it even brighter. So in terms of what I would use for color, literally anything, because wood can be various different colors, so that's fine. You can mix a little bit of these both together if you made both of them. I'm not picky at all. I'm just going to go for it. I mix a bit of it both together just to see what happens, and you get this nice brown. Doesn't have to be exactly like that one. That one is probably a little bit different, but I'm going to go with this one. It's nice. It's making me happy, so that's all that matters. And a little bit of water. Twirl your brush into the paint. So I'm just twirling it, kind of getting the extra paint off of the sides, keeping it nice and thin. And the water's going to keep it a long way as you paint. So when you're making the knots in your wood, I'm just doing very long spiral oval-y shapes. Something like this, you know, just like lightly kind of glazing across my canvas. Maybe little streaks. Let's go a bit closer. Because it's so thin, the way that I do it, from a distance it's not that noticeable, but you know, it has a little bit more of those lines and character added into the wood, and making more of a knot feel. So at the top I have a bit more. I can just start with a little straight line and then, you know, kind of curl it out, make it so that it looks like it has a bit of movement into it. So let's grab a little bit more black actually. You can see a bit more detail with some darker browns. I'm adding more black because it was pretty light overall with not too much black added in the first place. So I'm gonna curve around, loop it around, and just keep it really narrow and close together. I'm not doing circular shapes. I'm doing oval, very thin. So you can actually just go around like this. See how it's not too circular? It's more flattened and more of an oval shape. And let's just keep going. So you can also do stuff like little streaks. You just kind of press, do some lines, so it looks like there's cracks and stuff in the wood. There's so many possibilities that you can do. I like the streaky look. I like to make it look like it's been eroded and it's kind of been weathered a bit too. So I don't mind the imperfections at all. And on this side, maybe just a few here and there. Probably doing more now than I did in the actual original, but it's nice. It's hard to stop. It's really fun. And I'm just letting my wrist do a lot of the work, kind of just letting it go. I'm not making it perfectly straight. You can have some angled lines just a little bit, so it looks like it's kind of trailing through, doing different movements all the way through. I already know that this is all not going to be seen anyway, but getting more towards the sides and edges is just fine. It's great. I think I'm going to stop here now that I do have quite a bit going on, and I think I'm good with that. It already looks a bit like wood. I didn't go too crazy, but you can do a lot more if you want to. If you're wanting to put in maybe some white highlights around, if you're wanting to just go a little bit more above and beyond, you can highlight with white. Same technique, just lightly kind of going along some of the lines. Just on the top part of the lines I find is good. Give it that extra little pump of contrast, especially above this dark gray or black line that you did. It's actually in black, but it looks dark gray when we did our first coat. And you can just go right over on the top side. And the reason is, I think it gives it a bit of a lift, personally. So I'm just going to go right over top, and I think you can be the judge of it if you like this, or if you don't, just opt out. See the little white on top? I put it in here too, just a little bit of white again. Gives it more of an elevated kind of 3D look to me. So I won't go too crazy with the white, but feel free to put in a couple little lines here and there. Okay. I'm not going to do these circles until the very end, but that is where I'm going to stop with my background. I'm just going to finalize the line in the very middle with black for my second coat one last time. Okay, just kind of press. Just go. I'm going a bit thinner, I'm just not going to press as hard, so I'm just getting mostly the tip of it so that I can get it even deeper in the very center of that line. So you know how it gets even deeper into the very middle, and then it makes it look like, it's fading out on each side. It's not as dark on the top and bottom. So I'm going directly in the middle for my second layer. I'm not pressing nearly as hard, just very lightly, and you get a bit of a thinner line. I think it works out pretty nice. Okay, so that's where I stop, and I'll just kind of turn that a little bit so you can kind of see the black in the very middle. Not a huge difference, but just a little thing here and there I think helps. And then we will start with our base coat of the nest with some brown. It's actually a pretty dark brown. It's gonna look a little bit rough at first, but don't worry, we're going to get there. We're gonna add details on top. It's gonna look really awesome. Okay, so we are going to move on now to our base coat of the nest. In terms of brushes, whatever you want to do. Something not too small, so not a detailed brush. So one of your round ones, you can even stick with your large flat one if it works for you. So I think this one seems like a good one, this round one, this kind of medium round one. And we know how to make some sort of brown. We start with I like to mix right into the same brown because honestly it just helps making more brown. When I add more yellow and red, I'm getting that orangey look again, and then I'm going to take more black so that it's into a chestnut brown. So this would be more like a raw umber with maybe a dot of black, but it probably is good on its own. This looks black. It's actually not. It's going to be a super dark brown, you'll see. So right into the very center. If you want to grab something circular to trace around just so you're not trying to wing it the first time to make it perfect, that's okay. But you're actually going to do it a little bit smaller than you think at first. Okay, so we're going to just put in this very jagged circle. Very bumpy, wavy, just what we want. And then right into, see how it looks brown? In the palette it looks almost black. But yeah, I'm going to actually take in a little bit extra black and get right into the bottom here to darken this up a bit more. I want it to be super dark. So I'm just adding a bit more black into the paint. Because you can see a lot of the in-between twigs, it's shadow. So we want it to be really dark to start. And I'm just going to fill that in. I'm just taking more black with my brown to make sure it's super dark. And I'm going to fill it in, mostly going with the groove of everything, rounded, circular, not vertical. So stuff like that, and it has a bit of texture because when you move it around and you kind of let the streaks show, you can use a bit more paint on your brush too to get all of that started, and you can see it's starting to form a little bit. And all the twigs that are coming out, we're not even going to bother doing that right now. You're going to add that afterwards as we get there, but we want to put in our shadow to start too. So you can notice that there's a shadow, see, just right underneath. And you can add that in with me, or if you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm just washing this off. Wash that off, and we're making like a purpley color, so it's got like this mauve purple look. And the secret for making this color is make your purple first, yeah, so red, and just like a 2 parts red, 1 part blue is good, with a scoop of white and a little smidge of your brown, just a smidge. And I like to take more of the lighter brown, so if you have your lighter brown on the side, add it a bit in, and you get this very grayish kind of looking purple. You can even just substitute with a bit of black instead. Touch of black, so it's like a gray purple. Don't forget to balance it out with a touch more white. So you don't want it ultra dark and you don't want it ultra light. So just be careful. And you can see how it's looking kind of like with this. See, it's slightly purple. I think I'll add a touch more black or brown, your light brown. It kind of muddies it down a little. And this is what I do. I'm going to wipe off a little extra paint on a napkin so it's not heavily coated. And I'm going to go right around the bottom. I'm just going to streak it up, kind of wrap it, doing these little flicks using more of the tip of the brush. And when I get a little bit further down, see how I'm going to keep it choppy. So I'm just going to do little streak kind of flicks coming out here. Make it look like you're shadowing, making a shadow where all the twigs are coming out from, so you don't see a perfect line. You see some of the little gaps in the twigs sticking out. So that's basically what we're making, as if you're making a shadow for the twigs. and a little bit just from the shadow around the nest. And I go up here a little. And streak it just like that, kind of flick it out and just stop somewhere around here is fine, up towards the top. Just get a little bit over here. So to decide if you're dark enough, it's not, again, you can kind of tell, it's like in between. Just add a little bit more black to your purple if you want it to be slightly darker, and you can always, if it's looking too dark gray black, you can add, you just have to add more purple into it. That's all it is. It's just more red and a touch of blue. And then I just wash this off. So it has like this mucky purpley color, which is perfect. So it's, the point is that we're not making an actual purple, we're making the shadow, and it's got like a purple hue and tinge. It's lovely. When it's dry, you can put more actual purple on top if you do really love the purple and you want more purple. But after I wash it off, I'm just taking a little bit of white on my brush. So just lightly coated. And I'm going to just start lightening up more towards the edges. So I'm going over top of my wet purple. And I'm just blending it out. So meaning making it a bit lighter so you have more low lights down here and it's a little bit darker up here. Just a touch of white. Wipe off extra paint if it's too much. You don't want water on your brush. You want it to be kind of like a dry brush. You want it to be, I made it choppy. I'm just wiping off paint, grabbing a touch of white at a time. And it kind of looks like it's faded, see, into the wood, so it's disappearing a little. And I can easily come back to this later. I'm going to let this dry too. But when that's dry, I'm going to just go over my purple one last time, get it a little bit darker, right around the nest, so more of a darker purple, and just leave the outsides alone for the most part. Unless you need to go over them, unless you really want to go over it. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry for right now. Just wait a few minutes or get a hair dryer and blow dry that. Okay, so I've waited for mine to dry just a little bit, so it's pretty dry. And then you can go in with a second coat at the bottom here. And that's just really important to let things dry in between here and there, just so that you're not smearing paint around and it's going to actually stick and be more opaque and not as transparent and streaky. So back down here, let's just get into a darker purple. If you want to mix into the same purple, sure, it's pretty dry, but you know, I'm just going to mix in there anyway. I'm just going to put a little bit of blue and 2 parts red to 1 part blue once again. Just if you want to take dark brown, light brown, a little touch of that, as long as it's, or even black, it just makes it more grayish purple. A little bit of white, not too much, just a touch, because we're going to go a little bit darker. You can see just a little bit of a darker purple. You can always add more red and blue if you want it to be more purpley, more vibrant. There we go, just a little bit of black. So something like that, something close to that. Let's just start with down here. So I'm going to make some streaks. Not really adding any water here. Just make some more curvy lines, like as if you're mimicking, just very lightly. You can use a smaller brush too, mimicking the shape of the twigs once again, and just mostly darkening up right up close to your nest. I'm pretty close. And I'm actually going a little bit further down because you're going to make your nest bigger, so it's going to get just bigger and wider. So that's why I'm being pretty generous. So see how I'm just using the very tip of it, and you can use any smaller brush if you want to as well, but I'm just getting those little streaks in and just a few towards the edge here, just kind of lightly lightly dab, not dab, but lightly kind of flick it. Sometimes short little lines, almost like dabbing, because you're just doing this pretty quick a few times. There, so it's got a lot more deeper color. Perfect. Washing that off. And to balance this out just a little bit more, especially along the edges, if it needs to be a bit softer looking, if you're finding it needs a bit more of a softer look, because you can tell here is darker, whereas it's getting a little bit lighter. Again, that's just with some white is what I would do. White and maybe a touch of black if you want it to be more of a light gray. And just dry brush it. So wipe off, don't let any water sit on your brush. Just take a touch of white, touch of black, so it's a light gray. Wipe off some extra paint and then test it out. See if it's, when you go over the edges here, see if it's working for you. You can always add a touch more black if it needs to have a bit more of a grayish tone, but not too dark, because we're trying to make it look like it has a low light kind of fading out. Just along where it's trying to expand out at the bottom. And I'm going right over top of the purple. Yes, it's picking up the purple. That's okay, because it's dragging a little bit of that purple. That's fine. Yeah, you can see there's not too much paint on the brush because hardly any is coming off at all. Just grabbing a little bit more of that again. Wiped off the paint. Okay. So as you're doing this, sometimes I'm just mimicking the shapes of some twigs. See those little streaky lines? Just do some wavy, streaky lines, and it looks like it will reflect, actually cast a shadow of all of the twigs sticking out along the bottom. And it just breaks up all of that purple if you have a lot. So you just add some little wavy lines and make it nice and streaky like that. That's kind of what I do. Just sit and let it dry. Yeah, okay. Then, after when you're kind of done that shadow, we can start with all of our browns, different colors into the brown. It's going to be lots of different browns. It's going to have some very light yellowy ones, some red ones, kind of just orange. We already have our dark brown, but we can add more black if anywhere we need to really shadow some of the very bottom and center of the nest. So we'll get started on that whenever you're ready. Okay, so now that this is more dry, we can start working on all of the browns, and you can actually introduce some of your burnt umber, and you can bring in some yellow ochre too, which I think I mentioned in the supply list as well, if you want to put in some yellow ochre to get some more yellowy browns. But we can mix our colors together. I'm going to switch to this smaller brush here, but also a number 2 can do the same thing. So any one of these is good. They're pretty similar. Now let's mix a little bit more of some darker brown just to get some of the shape to our liking a bit more and overlapping some of that purple. So you can see I have lots of brown already. I just added more black into any of my existing browns, but remember it's equal parts yellow and red, and then like a pea size of black should be good to give it a nice chestnut dark brown. Bit of water. This is like a raw umber. So now I'm going to start going out a little bit, just a bit. We're not going, off too far to the side, really close to the nest. So think of it like it's kind of spiraling around a little bit, and just a mess. It's an organized mess. We know that. And so I'm just keeping it close. It's kind of flicking it out from a little bit here and there. And just try to keep in mind too that when you're doing this, not everything has to be perfect and fully connected everywhere. So for example, like I can just, if you have a little break in the line, just continue it and let it connect, and maybe something nice will come out of it. So if I go a little bit closer, some of those twigs are starting. I'm just doing, maybe I'll do like a full-on curve here. Come around the other way. So they're not all just going around a spiral. I actually went some this way and some the other way too. So some's coming out here. I add more later. I'm just getting this started with a few dark ones and just bringing this out a little bit bigger. You can have a little stick, a thick stick coming out on the side too. So try to use your imagination on making different sizes of things. So I'm going to have like a bit of a gap. So I have this edge right here. There's purple underneath from where my nest was. And then I have a thick line, just doing some squiggly things. It can be straight. It can be all really bent and kind of round and looks very bendy. And press hard and it looks like you have this little gap coming around. You can connect back into the center too. And if you need to, you can go right into the center as well. So your eggs are somewhere in here, right? And then with your black, I'm just going to go around. Make it known, it's like this is where I want my eggs to sit. Just put a second little coat basically, kind of in the center, and just make that more noticeable. Okay, so dark, back to my dark brown. I'm just using the tip and then just having fun with it, doing some weird little things, trying to keep it pretty close to the nest. I'm not going all the way out so far just yet. Starting off pretty dark, which is fine. A little touch of water, take your dark brown, and you can just do some of these squiggly lines. I just do a whole bunch of them all around the edge as well. See, it's starting to come together a bit more, just with the dark color. And a little bit here, so you can really just keep looking, taking a step back and trying to balance it out to your liking. See how I covered some of this purple now? It's not as noticeable. Okay, so that's kind of a good start with the dark color. You can see all outside of it is mostly light browns. We're not doing too much dark brown for a while, unless you need to shadow anything. But then I'm going to switch to my number 2 and or number 0. So you can start using mostly these brushes from here on out. If you have already been using the number 2, perfect, that's fine. I'm going to start using my number 2, and we're going to put in some light browns and more yellow ochre colors, yellowy browns. All right, so we just have to trust the process. We're going to be transforming this painting a little bit more because it's so dark right now. It doesn't really have anything going on. With my number 2 brush, you can grab your yellow ochre if you have yellow ochre and start mixing some of this. So this is kind of what it looks like. You can just take that with a touch of white and start putting in twigs. Honestly, anything related to brown, close to it. You can even add in some purple twigs in there because it can kind of pick up some of the purple from the shadow and just make it reflect through it. But anyways, we'll get there. I'm going to take yellow. I'm going to not take my contaminated yellow because that's generally what I do. But I'm going to start a bit more fresh so you can see how to mix it. Yellow and just a dot of red. So you get this, it still looks a bit orange, but when you add in a touch of white, And then a little touch of black. It turns like this muddy down, yellowy golden color. It actually has a greenish hue to it. It's really, really weird to see, but if you add a touch more red, so you don't want to add too much at a time, then it starts getting a bit more golden, slightly a little bit brown, but in a muddied way. So this brown, this yellow ochre looking color, just add a touch more red actually, if you want it to be a little bit more on that golden side. See? Touch of white, just a small little bit. It actually acts like a medium and it makes it pop out against the darkness. Without the white, you can't really see it at all. Water and just twirl your brush in here. Then let's just go for it. So we're going to use this color. You can always come back to this color. Let's start with some squiggly lines, usually longer streaks, and you can do some shorter ones as well. So you want to have a nice variety. And I'm going right over top, right around, in between, that kind of thing, keeping it random, not thinking too hard about it, and also not trying to place it in any particular spot. I'm just trying to expand a little bit and get it into the mix. So actually I'm expanding out a little bit more here too. This is quite light, so overall the contrast is pretty intense here since we have super dark and super light all of a sudden. So I'm going to keep this mostly along the edges and keep the center for some darker, a little bit darker browns, not as dark as what we have here, but generally a little bit darker. You can see it's got this like orangey look. It's bringing out the nice highlights. It's getting things going. So for down here, maybe I'll have a couple little twigs coming out. Like some, almost like it's little pieces of wheat in a way. It kind of looks like that, but it could be just weeds, really. Just maybe I'll go a little bit out here. It's little stragglers. Just press really light, keep adding more paint to your brush, touch of water if you need to add a bit more water. Just don't add water every time if you can help it, because then it gets way too watery and it's going to just not, it's going to be really transparent. It's not going to really stand out. So you can see some of them are going in different directions, and that's just what we want. So I'm just building onto that. And they're overlapping, crossing over, doing weird stuff, doing how nature and twigs always do. It's like just, it looks like it's not too smooth. Like it's got an almost prickly kind of look if you were to pick it up, but also it's not that prickly. It's got like a straw and hay kind of look too. Okay, so I did quite a bit with that, and you know, I can always go back to this color. I don't like using exact colors every time. I kind of just like to mix it random each time and see what I can get out of it. So if I add a bit more black, for example, of course it gets darker, but I can also add a bit more red too, and I can get into a, from here, just a darker brown, but not as dark as what I started with. So this is a good darker brown to have towards the center. A little bit of water again. Yeah, and just more red and a bit more black. Just add a little bit at a time. And then start more in towards the center. Just kind of, you can go right over top of the highlights too, intertwine with it, just cut it off. Don't think about the placement inside, just wrap it all the way through, around, over top, in between. Longer streaks and shorter streaks, very wavy. You can see it's I'm just putting it in, trying to fill up all the space I possibly can before I get into this very center. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave that dark. I don't need to go into here unless you want to add a couple of commas is what I call it, just some soft lines. So it has a little hint of it at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to continue with this color and start putting, like I have, I don't know, sometimes I put really jagged lines. You can press a bit harder sometimes. So something a bit more harsher looking. So like it's got this angular line breaking up all of the soft and roundness. So you can press a bit harder, you can press really light, you can have some stretching out. Just press super light when you're going pretty far out too. Maybe switch to your number 0. And I think just little stragglers escaping the pact here. Maybe I'll have some going this way instead of up that way. I'll just switch the direction. And something fun to do is just make some little twirly bits. Just do like a little loop-de-loop. So a loop-de-loop. It's hard to see, but I just went really round overall with very soft. So like here, let's just do a little loop. There. A loop-de-loop is what I was trying to say. Okay. Now I'm almost getting bored of this color. You can go do as much as you like. But I think I'll do a few little loopiness, just squiggles. That's exactly what it is, a squiggly line. Okay, so it's starting to expand a bit more, it's taking up more space, and it's starting to look, you know, like how a nest would. Now you have to decide really on what you think your nest needs. So take that step back. I always keep saying that to people. If you have lots of, say, loop-de-loops, because those are really fun to make, try to incorporate more straight, longer stems, like something like this, to balance it out. So it's not just like this really big cushion. It's got actual branches, you know, sitting in there. So you do want a few of those, and that's just what I call balance. If you have too many of these, maybe add more of those loops, and it makes it look a bit softer too. You have some soft twigs and you have more branches too. So I'm going to switch my brown again, and I'm going to keep going. Just add it in on the side here, not really into the center here at all. Just put some more different colors. You can go over some of your lines. So if you want to go over some of your dark brown or light brown, you can add a highlight with your orange, like an orange brown, and we'll put in some bright yellow in as well in terms of color. And you can always just add more colors too. So we'll do that in just a minute. Let it sit and breathe and take a few steps back. See what more, if you need to add more, if you should go a bit wider. Do a little bit of that with some of the existing colors we've been using. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to add in a little bit of some more orangey colors, slightly on the brown side, but more orange. It gives it a nice balance and bit of color into your nest. And then we're going to work on the eggs. Yeah, I think we'll do that. So we want to let this dry for a little bit too. Let's just put in a bit of orange, and we'll put in a bit of color. You'll see it's going to look pretty nice. Okay, we kind of have an idea how to make orange because we make it before we make the brown. Just do 3 parts yellow, 1 part red. Pretty decent orange. Then you want to add in just a little bit of white. Remember, it acts like a medium. And just balance it out to your liking, more yellow or more red, to if you want more yellowy or more red looking. either or. I mean, more red is nice for a bit of like a coral color or a fiery orange look. You can do a little bit of both. So let's put in, I'm going to add a touch more red actually. I'm feeling like it should be just a bit more red for fun. And I'm just going to go right over top or highlight any of my darker brown bits. Maybe add new streaks. Orange is really nice. You can always put brown right back over top if you're not a big fan. A bit more red. I'm just going to pick out some of these little dark brown lines I see, and now you can see more of the defined edging and twists and turns that it has. But I'm going to go back to some of my dark brown here and just try to get a few more of my lines, maybe more of like a sharper lines, just straighter, a bit longer, so that all my squiggly ones they're not as much, or not overwhelming the painting really. I call them more intrusive lines because they just seem like they're so sharp. They just got like more of a straight angle to it. And they're not as bent really. Okay. Perfect, so I have a lot going on. Now, what I'll do, maybe just a little bit more actually. Not a little bit more, maybe like one or two. Okay. So I have some of that orange in there, and if you want to hide any of it, just go back to some of your brown. You can just go lightly over top, dark or light. Any brown is fine. And you just add black to your orange really if you don't have any more brown. Just go back over it. And it dilutes it. It gives it more of a softer, tame look. Okay. So let's work on our eggs. We're going to use the number 2 brush. We're going to put that in, and then we're going to put some more black. So I'm going to use straight black. It gives it a chance to dry, and you can put black in between and break up all the color on the sides. It's a good opportunity to give it more shadow in between some of your branches and twigs, so it looks like it has more of layers underneath and it looks more shadowed into the bottom. So let's mix our blue with white with just a dot of yellow. You can add more yellow to your liking so it turns more teal. Teal or greenish, minty green. I like the teal. Slightly teal. Still more on the blue side. And it's neither too dark or too light, so I added a bit of white in here, as you can see. And we're going to darken the edges and we're going to highlight the top. So start with just a medium in between color, not too much white. Has a pretty good, vibrant look overall. This is fine. Now if we can fit 3, because 3 is a great number, let's do that. And really the trick is, it doesn't really matter how big or how small your canvas is. What matters is you add perception and depth into it when you put in your eggs. You can't just place a big giant one here, then it looks like the nest is really small and the egg doesn't really quite fit in the nest. It just looks a lot bigger. So I'm going to place right? So just imagine this is, you can kind of see where they would sit. So they're not going to sit up here. They're going to kind of sit more snuggled and right into here. I'm going to put a nice line. It's going to, we know what eggs look like. They have more of a pointed top, just round overall, but a little bit wider at the bottom and then a bit more narrow towards the top. And just fill that in very roughly. Just don't go over it a million times because you'll pick up more and more brown. And you know what? Hint of brown is kind of nice. It gives it a bit of a dirty, kind of natural, pigmented look. And I'm just going around. You can turn your canvas for each egg you do, so you do it. You're not trying to make it sideways and it's looking really wonky. Just ideas on how to do this without too much trouble. A little bit more pointy and rounded at the top. Then, okay, seems like a good amount. A little bit of brown showing through, but I'm happy with that. Okay. So we're going to shadow this. Don't worry, it's going to be shadowed. Now, let's do this again. And we're just going to turn them a little bit. So this one is, what I did is I've just put it at a different angle, facing sideways more. Touch of water is just fine too. If you've been wanting to use water, you can use that. And if you pick up a lot of brown as well, don't worry about it. Let the brown sit there. It actually gives it a lot more texture. Because usually they have little brown spots on them too. But you can always do a second coat if it's going to bug you. It's really how you want to make your eggs. What you think looks good. Okay, now putting in my last one. However I can fit it. So if you feel like this is a good, if you feel like this is where you want to put it, you can also have it fit in whatever works for you. Okay, so you just want to make sure there's space. Don't force anything. Fit it where it would make sense to you. And just going to make this, I can't really go out this way too much more, right? So we can slightly just almost touch the other egg, but we don't want it to wrap around or bend around it. That's not realistic whatsoever. Okay, so I have some base coats here and we're going to sharpen it up a little bit more because we have to put in the shadow. This is a great time to do it now. What you're going to do is you're going to start with just a bit of black on your brush. You just wash it off, take black, same brush, kind of like a little bit of a lighter coating. You don't want just a whole clump of it. So you're going to go right around the edges. You could take a bit more paint for when you're shadowing, say right in between here. You're just going to go around and just darken this little spot deeper in color. Just going to sharpen around, go around this egg. And with the little paint on your brush, now you're going to just pull it in. So you're just going to go, when you have too much paint, you're just going to pull in a whole bunch of black, but when you go in with a little bit of black on your brush, it just gives it that shadowed look along the edges. You're just going to pull it in, letting it blend with that blue and keeping the very center still brighter. And you can actually use your finger to smooth it out, you know, you can just get rid of all your streaky lines. But that's only just a little bit. I actually did a lot more than that. Let's just start with that. Start with your black, go right around the edge. Don't go outside, don't pull it outside. You're going to pull blue outside of your egg. Around with black. Then bring it in just along the edges. See how it's kind of taking up a lot of space. It's going, there's like very little space now on top in the middle. You want to make it look rounded. So you want highlight mostly sitting on the top and just dab and kind of smooth it out with some of your finger. It gives it more texture and you get rid of those very streaky lines. Now you have a shadowed egg. So just by doing that, all of a sudden we have a more realistic looking egg compared to the other ones. Just remember, straight black right along the edges. So it's nice and dark along the sides. Good, let's just do it again. Take some black again, go right around. Not too much black paint. You can start with a little bit more when you're going around your eggs, but you don't want to go in with a clump of it. Okay, just wipe off extra paint just in case. Because when you have too much, see how it picks up a lot of that black, but I'm going to start dragging it in. More of a dry brush technique, I don't mind that at all. Keep going around with the groove, making all these inner circles. It's going to pick up some of that blue and then dab or spread it around with your finger. Now you have a shadow. And I'm trying to work a little bit faster because before this blue dries, but if it does end up drying, not to worry, just go over it with a bit more blue again, and then you can do this technique a lot easier with blending. Otherwise, you might find dabbing with your finger does not blend whatsoever because there's nothing to blend it with. There's no wet paint. There. Look how easy that is. Or supposedly. Hopefully it is easy. So after this, if you need to do a bit more black, always take that step back. It's hard to see and tell just by looking at it really up close. You can always add a little extra layer, but I am adding a bit more shadow with some blue. You can keep it with the black color. If you just like it like this, you can just add a highlight and just call it a day, or do an extra layer of some black coming in on the side once more. But I'm going to add a little bit of blue coming in, so you can see how that's looking. It's more blue, but this is really nice too. You can add speckles of brown in here, or speckles of white, to make it a bit more interesting and more textured. Alright, so I've just let that set and rest for a minute. I just do that time to time. Things are still a bit damp here and there, but for the most part it's pretty dry. So just have that patience to let it dry too. That's why a blow dryer really is handy if you're an eager painter. I mean, I can be too. So I'm going to now take in a little bit of more blue into that teal. And a touch of yellow once more, but no more white. You can see it's much darker. You can actually just take blue and a touch of yellow without any white. It's going to look really, really dark, but I mean, it's nice, either or. Wipe off the extra paint so it's very lightly coated and just lightly go around that dark sides, you know, the edges where you put in from the black. And your alternative again is just to take very little black and dry brush it in so it's coming off a bit lighter overall into the sides of your eggs. I like to do, I did mostly blue in the original, blue and a touch of yellow, but there's nothing wrong. I kind of am digging the black right now more than what I did in the original because I feel like it's just doing that thing that I want it to do. It's making it nice and shadowed. So there's various ways to do this. And you can actually just add a touch of black to your blue and do a happy medium. So just kind of rubbing it in on the side here. Maybe I'll add a touch of black just on this side once more because I want it to be more shadowed, I think, right on this edge where more of the nest is kind of coming in. So you can just take a little bit of black and some blue, or black and some of your teal. Can't really tell in the color when you're doing it with the black anyways. And just shadow more where your nest is engulfing the edges. So I feel like it's engulfing and covering and shadowing the spot over here on this side. And a little bit on this side right here. So just right where it's getting into the nest. That's all. Washing that off. So my blue teal, if you've been adding it in, you can go a little bit more into the center. Just drag it. Very little paint once again, just to remind you, just in case you're going with a lot of paint, you want to refrain from using too much paint. I actually have some of these kind of touching. Just want to make sure that it's staying pretty dark around that section. Just kind of take some black and go right in between. Make sure that it's nice and dark in between the two eggs. Okay. So I'm going to finish up with a highlight on here whenever you're done playing around with it. I'm going to show you a bit closer as well so you can see those streaks and strokes. You can actually just dab to give it more of that texture and get rid of any lines. Give it that kind of dirty look, muddied, spotted look too. And then wash off this brush. Take white, very light coating. So I'm just wiping off extra white. What I'm going to do here is just go and blob into the very middle and use your finger to pick up some of that white, and it just kind of spreads it around and it's no longer as bright, but you have your highlight. Okay, so let's do that again. Very little white. Go right into the very center. So just the very, very middle. So it's like it's hitting more of the very top, because when things are rounded, we know that on the side it's not hitting as much of the light as it is on the very top, and then it goes back down to a roundness again. So the very top, where it's the highest point of that rounded part of the egg, is where if the light's going to be hitting it. And I'm just getting rid of some at the very tip of the egg. That's not typically hitting most of the light either. So just on the very tip of it. Mostly I think around the middle to the bottom is a good spot. Okay, let's do this again. Very little white paint. Right into the very middle. avoiding too much of the top area. And of course you can do actual streaks of white, so you can, again with very little, just do a little swipe. You're just kind of going along the side, doing a little swipe for a glare. So that's just more of a glare look. And just go back over with any black or dark blue with black, plain blue. So many different things you can do. I like to just do blue and some black around any of the edges wherever necessary. Okay, now I'm going to leave that. Yeah, I think I'll leave that for the most part. We can let that dry. Maybe I'll just put in one more little dash of blue right here. And maybe a bit of extra black on the side. Looks like there's a lot of highlight in this one for some strange reason. So in terms of highlighting for the yellow, more of like a light yellow ochre, so you're just taking this and adding more white to it, or that same color when we made our golden yellowy color with the brown. It was yellow with a touch of red. You can actually just add if you have an existing orange, just add a bit more yellow to it. Touch of black. If you take too much black, it's just going to look black, right? So just mostly yellow to start and add more red later. So if it's looking green, add a touch more red and a little bit more white. So like a big scoop of white. Yeah, now we have a yellowy brown. And then, let's see, what I can do is I have opportunity to now start going around my eggs a little bit more, so I can just overlap slightly, maybe not too much, but you can see you can overlap a little bit, make it look like it's really in there at the bottom and this is all surrounding the top type of thing. Okay, and then just work pretty close into the eggs, more for highlight. You don't have to just stick with this color. This is something I think it's good for extra highlight. So if you have a lot of highlight, maybe go back to some of your darker browns. That's probably a good idea. Or oranges, any colors that you liked. If you want to try and experiment with new ones, you should do that. For me, I think I'll just switch to a touch more black in here, and a bit more red, a little bit more red overall. Try to get slightly different brown because it's never the same every time. It's not ultra dark. Oh, I touched the light part. And you can just go over any brightness, anything that's too bright, add more twigs, just keep going with it, layers and layers of it. So in between all of that, you feel like you probably have a good amount or you have lots going on. The next thing that I do before I put in, say, colors of purple or pink, I actually do put in some pink. And it's nice to put in pink too, maybe for some flowery looks and bits here. it balances out color personally, and you don't really just see straight pink. It's kind of, in the grand scheme of it all, it's just a little couple hints of pink hues. It kind of neutralizes, I think, some of the color. I'm going to take a little bit of black, okay? Then I'll take pink. So just straight black. Just make sure that, first of all, around in between the little crevices of your eggs, you have these little bits of black. And you can actually go in pretty thick and start, see, you can just pick and choose spots. Like right here, I have a lot of light brown. Maybe I will, in this, one of the darker spots, I'll just fill in some black, do some squiggly lines again, but maybe press a bit harder. And now it looks like I have more gaps there. I have more shadow in between, I have more gaps, and it looks like I have more twigs on the surface that I can see more of instead of just all random color. So that's just my little sneaky trick that I find works out really well, is black in between to break up color and to add extra shadow into your layering. So I have a lot down here. Let's just put in some black, more into the darker brown sections, not every single spot, but you don't want to just, you kind of want to pick and choose in between, working around some of your lighter spots and just really darkening up the darker spots. Yeah, just a little bit at the bottom, so you can just go over top of some of your twigs or right next to it and just shadow a little bit more and pop out those twigs a bit more too. So you can go around some highlights. Let's see, so I have a highlight here. Maybe I'll just go right next to it and just give it a little bit of a lift. Black. This is some of my darker brown, light brown. I'm just following some of my twigs that I have coming out next to it. If you're not too careful, then maybe stick within the nest and just mostly do it in the mumbo jumbo stuff, all of it. And then stop whenever you think it's time to stop, whenever you can. So anytime now, I will stop. I'm just gonna leave that, just leave it. The black really, I think, just brings it to another level. Maybe up close, you're thinking, oh gosh, but you can see up close here, you got some black lines all over the place, breaking up my twigs. And it just, you know, it makes it look like it's got shadow in between all of them. It can go deep. You can see that it has layers. Excellent. So what I want to do next is, I mean, if you guys are ready, whenever you're ready, I like to finish up with more absolute highlights. And it's not just white, it's actually just yellow and white for the most part, maybe like a beige. You can do yellow, white, and a touch of red, so it's kind of creamy looking. Very lovely. I put it in like everywhere. You can see little highlighted bits here and there. Not in every twig, but just kind of throughout. So you're picking and choosing what you think is going to hit more light and what's just lighter overall. And then we're going to put in little leaves. You can put flowers. I'm going to put in some pink first right away. And you can also do purples. If you want to do purple, you can. But red, touch of white. If you want to mix it on top of purple and it's still wet, sure. You can add a tiniest little dot of blue if you like it purpley. See, not too light or too dark. I think it blends pretty well. So if I just go, let's do a little bit more white. If you add a little small touch of yellow into it, it will give it a softer look there. So I'm just going to go more, not on top of the black, I worked so hard to put it there, just as a complementary color to light brown any of your lighter browns or yellowy browns, and it's just here and there. Okay, so I'm just randomly placing this. You can go over top of orange instead. And can you really tell that it's there when I place it in? Not really, which is kind of the point. It adds to the color, but I think it gives it a next layer of intensity and realism, where in the nest you can see all sorts of things in different colors. And it's pink. Like, do you normally see pink in there? Not really. It's a great color. Not very noticeable. And brown to the rescue if you have way too much pink. Maybe you put in like a neon pink somewhere, you're like, just put brown over it. All right. Pretty happy with how it's looking. I'm going to do my final highlights of the bright yellow. Then just finish up with these little weeds or wheat bits, flowers, like a little bud or something. And if you want to add flowers, some leaves, feather. And we'll finish up with the little the screws that are kind of keeping it all together, you know, as if it's hanging on a wall. Okay, so highlights. This is actually really fun. Even the first time I painted it was really fun, but this is just even more fun for some reason. Just very satisfying. Colors, you can't really go wrong. I'm taking yellow and white, and you can see, obviously it's just a bright yellow, but if you add a smidge of red, it gives it a creamy color. It's still yellow, but it's got a creamy look. Again, if you take too much red, it's just going to be pink, so that's just a dot. All right, so let's pick and choose. For example, I can already see there's like something right there. I'm just going over existing lines or adding new ones. Just barely touching with my number 0 and putting that all over, mostly obviously on the top part here, but you're basically saying this is more of the top layer. This is where more of the light is hitting, and these are just lighter twigs overall. Some down here, sure. Couple up here. And I'm going to stop right around here. Not too much, kind of just enough what I need to get my point across on highlights. And that's it. Okay. So my next step, for the feather, we can, I mean, if you want to put it in now, later, or maybe not at all, you just don't want to put a feather, it's okay. Let's put in some green bits. I'm going to use my number 2, or you can use your medium round. You know what? Maybe the medium round is fine. Just any of those brushes. With green, I'm going to take some blue and yellow equal parts. Then a little pea size of white. I have a typical green. Just add a small little touch of black if you like muted tones. You can add more if you want an even more muted, but just a smidge is good because it's not typically vibrant green. It's got a little bit of that undertone of some of muddiness and some earthy look there. So first off, let's just put little flicks, little kind of dabs here and there. Not overly noticeable, which is nice because it blends with just the way that we have all of our twigs. So naturally there are some leaves here and there. You can see just kind of flicking them outwards, kind of blobbing it in. They don't have to fully be attached to every branch, but it's nice to just put a couple little dabs here and there on the ends to make it look like they brought the leaves with them. I only did a few, okay, so I didn't overdo all of that greenery, but you can certainly do a lot more to your liking. I did put a bit more just right in this corner. So for example, like these leaves that are kind of sticking out, just start with a thin line more off to the side, not too far in, because then you have these leaves really far in. So I'm going to go right off to the side, almost out of the side of it. Here's a good spot. And just kind of flick it, kind of curve it, and then here I have another one directly below it, curving down too, slight curve. Adding a touch more yellow and white now. I'm going to take another dip of yellow and white. And I'm going to just flick it out just a bit. It's kind of feathery right now, but keep it nice and thin on the end. I would say switch your brush to something smaller, but I do like these jagged little lines. So coming out from the side, kind of flick it outwards, narrow at the top. And alternatively, you can just do jagged lines. You can just go back and forth, let the shape take a bit more of a random look, because it actually looks like a tree if you think about it. See, right now it looks like a tree. It's just got this, you know, the jagged line on the sides is not too smooth, but it's not perfect. So you can have it a little bit further out on some sides, a little bit more pointy, but a little bit rounded and curved up. You can see it's curved up on the bottom and just wider, and then keep it pretty narrow at the top. Pretty much like a tree, but it's all curving upwards. It's all pointing more up. So down here, since it's pointing down, I'm just going to flick it down, keep it really pointy down here, just nice and thin, and then these little jagged lines kind of sticking up and down, or out and down. And just a bit more rounded right here where the bottom is. You can just basically connect them. That's what I did. So they're basically touching. These are the start of our leaves. But before I put a bit more detail, let's just off to the side. There's a twig I kind of follow. Putting in, I just press and kind of flick it outwards. Press, flick it outwards. They're like commas, right? So you just press and then flick it out. Just curl it down, give it some bit of a flopping over kind of look. And if you're making a little bud, you can basically press and just go a little bit thicker. This is optional because in the original, you'll see that I actually have this bud of a flower, the green wrapping around it, of the pink. So if you're feeling that, that's what it's going to be. You can actually just make any of these into a flowery bud. All right, washing this off. Just going to let it rest for 1 minute. It can be a bit damp, so that's fine. We're going to finish up the details into our leaves, put a bit of pink for a bud if you want to do that for a flower, and then start our feather. So we're almost there. All right, I'm using my detailed brush. I just waited 2 minutes or something like that for it to slightly dry. It's still damp. Now my number 0, all you're going to do is add more white to it and more yellow. Yellow and white, get a bit more lime yellowy green. And this is going to go like you're going inside the middles or just on the edges. You're just kind of going around, highlighting a little bit of your leaves. Same technique, but now you have it popping out just a little bit more. And see in here, just going to highlight right into the middle. I'm just doing some streaks flowing down into the center. And then I have some green on each side, that darker green that we had. So you don't want to cover your green. You're just going more in the centers or the sides to give it more of a highlight. Okay, so just do that over here. A little couple flicks there. Pops out. Now when we put just a little bit of water, I'm going to go just along, you can go along the outside, and if you go outside of these leaves and just outline, do little tiny lines sticking out, it makes it look bigger, but if you stay within the green, it makes it look a little bit thinner and smaller. So that's up to you. I generally like to stay within the green and not extend it out further and wider. That's just me, because I think I made it the size I was happy with. And you can just do little kind of jagged lines again. They're not perfect. Or flick them outwards for that feathery look, and it gives it more of a jagged look too. So just along the edges, and if it's too thick, go back to some darker green, which doesn't have to be the exact same green, as long as it's just darker, or not as dark, but anyways, just similar green. Even if it's different, you can see it's got a cool effect. You can just kind of go around the edges and thin out all of that lighter yellow you just put in, or lime green. So it's not as thick overall. It's got like this, just a small little outline. That's it. Okay, so just touching up on that, and I'm going to use this lime green to just make a couple of what I call veiny bits. It has these little lines and streaks, almost like branches coming from the middle. Squiggly lines too, coming from the middle and going up in the direction that the point of your leaf is flowing to. So if it's, down, is just pointing down from the middle and out. So from the middle, point it and follow towards the end, but go outwards a bit more. Nothing perfect, a couple streaks here and there, and then I wash this off. I take equal parts yellow and blue again, but with no white whatsoever. So you have this really dark green. It's almost like a viridian green in a way, but dark green. Then just go right into the middle, barely touch, just put a little center line basically towards the tip of it. And you can also do some of the lines just around next to the lime green in new spots. I keep it pretty random, so that's why I kind of put it all over the place. Right through the middle, up towards the top, and just a couple squiggly bits streaking outwards, up and out. There you go, pretty cool. Go over that center one more time. Just add black too if it's not dark enough. So if you need to, you can go around any of your leaves with this too. You know, if you're feeling fancy and you like the extra work and just adding more color. Just something really quick too. It's not a huge, big thing. But I do like to, with my dark green, on anything that you're making a flower, just add an extra stem coming down from any of your little leaves that are a bit bigger and connect it to a stem, or just bring it in onto a branch. That's really all. So to give it more of a bud, you can actually just make your light pink once more. Let's just make that light pink again. Make that light pink once more and put this. You can just make a bud without it being around the green, or if you're not trying to draw too much attention to everything. See, this is, actually don't remember the name of this type of flower, but this is where it's kind of budding out. It's got this wrapping around of the green. So I just go around the side a little bit, close to the bottom, and then up at the top. It looks like you have something that's going to sprout soon. Because it's spring. Okay. So wash that off, and then if you need to, sometimes I just touch up with my green, like mostly the darker green, and just go around the edge if needed one last time. Kind of fun. This is just dark green. I like to keep it darker around the bottom and the edge here. But when it's dry, you can easily add it in, no problem. Okay, so let's finish up with our feather and put the little screws coming in on the sides if you want to. All right, so we're going to do our feather, and I'm going to show you on a piece of paper first, basically. So in here, you can put the feather if you want to or not, but it's mostly just black, and then you highlight with some white for a bit of a gray, light gray and black look. It's always got a soft bend, so you do want to start off with your number 0 brush, and you can practice first. You can see kind of like the shape of how it's going to look. And that's just in black. So notice that everything you want to think feathering when you're doing your strokes. Very light, and it's a technique that we were kind of doing with our leaf right here, the leaves over there. I'm going to just press and then flick it out. It's a little bit thicker. And then just let it go. So, water, always water and black paint. Start off almost like, in a way, you're making a palm tree. So let's start a little bit more. We have a little bit of a line, nothing here, and then just kind of flicking up and out slightly. When you're running out of paint, you'll notice, so just add more paint and water, and then keep going. Lots of overlap. See how it's staying close to that line? It's not going too far out. And usually it's just flowing towards, like you're making a palm tree leaf or a branch, a little bit less at the top, like shorter lines, and some longer ones in the middle towards the bottom. And they're not all the same size, so you can see some of them are coming out a little bit further than other parts. So I'm just going to bring some out a little bit further here and there. And at the bottom, you know, we always see this when you see a feather kind of laying around. Usually it's got little flicks kind of curling out at the bottom, just really short ones. But you have to be careful, because if you do it too straight out, it kind of looks spiky. So you want to do a soft curve, soft little bend. And then you can see the difference if it's too spiky, you just want to keep it more towards this direction. Just do a few when you're doing it. Just kind of do a few like curving outwards, but that's pretty much all you need to do. And then leave it alone. Okay, so that's the start of our feather. Okay, let's do this again. Well, I'm doing it again on my painting. It's going to be hard to see, so this is why I showed you on something that's white and very light overall, whereas here it's going to be really hard to see, dark on top of darkness. Yeah, I'm going to press and then flick it out. Okay. I'm just going to go for it. I have a feeling you're not going to see very well at all. Yeah, it's hard to see. Good thing I showed you on the piece of paper. So take your time. When you run out of paint, add more water and paint to it. Lots of overlap. You don't see much gaps. You don't see the main line that we had going through the center again. You can see it's pretty much hidden. It's all covered by feathers. So it's got a lot of feathers, but there's some longer and shorter ones that are noticeable. Alright, so I have the start of my feather here. Then washing this off once more. You can do this while it's still a bit wet. If you want to just wait a minute, you can. Maybe you can try it just taking plain white, because I know it's still wet. I just painted it. It's going to not be dry whatsoever, but I'm going to take a little bit of white paint on my brush. Touch of water. You don't need too much. Just don't overly coat it. Then follow right down the middle, and then for that stem, and then just kind of stop. Bit of a highlight. Use your white to just go over some of everything. Just you can add more in, just go over little bits, and you're going to pick up some of that black. You're going to get bits of gray now, bits of white. So you're going to get all of the layers and levels of the gray going through. You can leave the center alone, but you can always go back through the center with black again. So just keep going. Okay, so it's a bit more highlighted, and then you can go right through the center one last time with black, whenever you feel like you have enough white in here. And when it's fully dry, you can go back and put actual white highlights if you're finding it's just way too gray. Wash this off, then take black paint. Just go right from that, just above that stem where the feathers are actually kind of starting to spread out, and then right down the middle. That's all you really need to do. And that's essentially it for the feather. I'm going to give a bit more white highlights when it's dry, so in the meantime, I'm going to work on these little circles, little screws on the sides. So you can do one here in the bottom and skip the middle, especially if you don't really have enough space. So you can just accommodate to, what you've been doing. Don't think I'm going to do the middle ones this time. I'm just going to do the tops and bottoms. Let's see how that looks. So let's do number 0, yeah. Number 0 brush, and just make a circle towards the sides. You want to try and place them in similar spots on each side. So you don't want to go like here and then over. You want to keep it in the general same area close to the edge. So for me, I feel like the middle between this top and bottom seems like a good spot. Okay. Let's do it here. So I want to keep it around the same alignment. Just little things like that I think really help with the overall look. Level with this one, go across. And if you're wondering how big these are, they're small, but they're not that small. Like they have, if you go up close, you can see it's a little bit bigger than you probably think. And making them all generally the same size is probably a good idea too. This one just needs to be a little bit bigger. Okay, and the last one. So this level right around here. Okay. All right. So this one I did 4 instead of the ones here too. I just feel like it would be behind the sleeve, and it's kind of like, do I really want to work around it? Not really. I'm just going to leave that. And I'm just playing around right here. I'm just putting some darkness on the bottom of this little plant thing. So for highlights in there, yeah, highlights, I'm going to do, again, white. You just want to take your white paint. And I'm going to also, I'm just going to do a comma pretty much on each side. So on the left side of every single one of them. And just let the black kind of blend with it too. So it looks like it's got this faded look as you kind of spread it around, but it's more on the left side. Left side. And just, you can wrap it around a little bit more should you want to keep going and kind of spread it and blend it out. So it gives it just a little highlight. And you can always do a second coat too. Mostly just to really brighten up the top left corner, that's all. So I'm washing this brush off and finishing up my final highlights into my feather. Maybe a couple extra whites, little flicks down here, and just doing a few more layers, make it stand out a little tiny bit more. It's a bit brighter. There. Okay, so this was pretty fun. And, you know, finishing touches. If you want to call it done now, that's great. Finishing touches could be like going back to some of that purple you had in the beginning, similar to it. Maybe a little bit extra white so it's not too dark. But that's your call. And you can just going to quickly mix that again to show you. But you can see like maybe whatever brush, you can try to mimic shapes underneath some of your branches, first of all. Just go around if you want to put some more just to give it more of a shadow. But that should really do it. Okay. So design your painting and show off your results on our Facebook page, and maybe if you want to in our group, we have a group on our Facebook page. It's like a support group and you can post it there. We like to see interpretations and how it went for you. Such a cozy painting. I like it. Good to hang up, and you can paint your edges black or just, you know, the same gray that you've been using here, which makes perfect sense. But hopefully you had a good time and maybe you learned some things and this was not as bad or as hard, more relaxing if anything. So hopefully you'll paint along with me again sometime. You can check it out on our YouTube channel, you can subscribe, or on our website. We have lots of Zoom events too, artistpaletteDurham.com, and on our Facebook page, the same thing. It's just everywhere. It's hard to miss. Thanks guys, thanks for joining. Have a good night.